Okay, Parshas CHUQAS. Hashem is speaking to Moshe and Aaron, and it talks about Zos CHUQAS HaTorah. Parshas CHUQAS, an appropriate name. What's the chok that it's referring to? Parah Aduma. The whole korban that is brought, if a person becomes tamei. Now, the truth is, not much of the Parah Aduma is a chok. There are a lot of reasons behind everything in the Parah Aduma. For example, why do we have a Parah Aduma? Maybe you want to just close the door. Just close. Why do we have a Parah Aduma? To be machaber, to forgive the Cheta Egel. Cheta Egel makes sense because gold generally is what color? Yellow or red. The pure gold is red. Parah Aduma is a red calf. So you can say that you take the Parah Aduma, and just like the golden calf was burnt totally, the Parah Aduma is burnt totally. Avodah Zarah makes a person tamei, like touching a dead body. So the ashes of the Parah Aduma makes a person tahor from the tumah of a dead body. You can say, why does a person become tamei? That's a good question. I mean, you see a dead body, one person touches it, the other person doesn't. What changes? Well, the short answer to that is that we have this concept of tumah to avoid people spending a lot of time with dead bodies. In the olden days, they used to do magic and sorcery with dead bodies, and we tend to focus on the living, not on the people who have passed on. There are halachos. For example, a person is distraught, they lost a family member. How often can they go to the cemetery? Can they go every day? Can they go twice a day, 3 times a day? We try to avoid going more than once in 30 days. That means we don't live in the cemetery. A person davens. You can daven anywhere. You don't have to daven in the cemetery. The irony is that in Israel, you go to all the kvarot, the big tzaddikim, what do you have there? You have yeshivas. I mean, that's really strange. Kever Rachel has a yeshiva. You go to Meron, there's a yeshiva there. You find it strange to have a yeshiva in a cemetery. And these are really not cemeteries, these are individual graves, but it's still an unusual thing. So, as much as there is mystery behind the Parah Aduma, there's not a lot of mystery. There's a lot of explanations for all the aspects of it. Yet, the Torah calls it a chok. And there's a message here. And the Meforshim talk about it in a very unique fashion. The Torah goes ahead and gives you things that you don't understand. Why? Because a person can make a mistake. A person can think that all mitzvos are common sense. And I understand why we have these mitzvos, because they are good for our health, good for our well-being, good for the community. But when a person thinks that way, then if some mitzvah, for whatever the reason in his particular situation, doesn't make sense, they say, I don't have to do the mitzvah, because the whole purpose of the mitzvah is to accomplish A, and I don't need A, so therefore it doesn't apply to me. So therefore we have mitzvahs that are chukim, that have no explanation. Some of the more famous ones is shatnez, or meat and milk together. These are chukim. So it comes to teach us that we do mitzvahs not because they make sense. A lot of them do. Don't murder, don't steal. A lot of them make sense. But that's not why we do mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are gezeros. There are instructions we believe from Hashem to us. And we do them because those are the instructions we have. Who gave us those instructions? Moshe Rabbeinu. How did Moshe Rabbeinu get them? From Hashem. Maybe Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah was a conclusion. No. He had espaklaria hami'ira. He had clear vision. When Hashem spoke to Moshe, it's like you and I are talking. Wasn't a vision. Ironically, next week we're going to talk about, and we've talked about this in the past, that there's a section in the Torah that did not come from Moshe. Bilam. Bilam gives us his own parsha. Yes, Moshe wrote it down, but Bilam was the one who said it. And it leads the Chazal to say that Bilam was as great as Moshe, which is ironic, right? Because Bilam was nowhere near as great as Moshe. You can't even put the two in the same sentence. I saw an interesting explanation, more for next week than this week. I saw an interesting explanation They say that there are two animals that can tell you exactly when noon is or midnight is. One is the eagle. The eagle flies high and has superior vision. So he knows exactly, the eagle knows exactly the times of day. And the other is the bat. A bat in the cave knows exactly when midnight is. So the eagle knows when noon is, and the bat knows when midnight is. So the both of them know exactly the times of day. Yet an eagle and a bat are as different as day and night. There's no comparison between the two. So Moshe and Bilam had very clear vision, but they were different as day and night. The Gemara seems to imply that Bilam had such clear vision because Hashem didn't want him to give his own interpretation. Hashem didn't trust him. So Hashem spoke to him, this is exactly what you're going to say. He didn't trust the guy. Moshe, he trusted. Bilam, he didn't trust at all. So, we compare the two, but the two have nothing in comparison. No question whatsoever. Okay, so we have chukim. Those CHUQAS HaTorah. And because of that, we seem to be able to understand what has happened. One more point that's brought down, very interesting point. It is, Moshe knew all the reasons behind the Parah Adumah. So they asked why. Shlomo HaMelech didn't know. Why did Moshe know? So the answer they give is because Moshe was not involved in the golden calf. When the sin of the Chet HaEgel took place, Moshe wasn't even in this world. He was in Shemayim, not involved. So they asked, but Aaron really wasn't that involved anyway, but he was. But the Levi, Shevet Levi wasn't involved. So how come they don't know the secret? So I saw one of the Meforshim explain, one of the rabbis explain, that it's very comparable to secondhand smoke. You're in a room, people are smoking, you're not smoking. And all of a sudden you develop an ailment, heart ailment. Why do you develop a heart ailment? You didn't smoke a cigarette in your life. What's the reason? Something called secondhand smoke. You know what secondhand smoke is? You breathe in someone else's smoke.
Mm-hmm. Passive smoker.
Right?
Passive smoker.
Passive smoking. And it affects you. So Shevet Levi, you're right. They were not involved in the golden calf, but they were there. So they were tainted. They were affected by secondhand smoke. Yehoshua wasn't there. Yehoshua was by Har Sinai. But he heard the noise, he heard the singing, he heard the revelry. He was affected by it. People are affected by it. You don't have to be involved in the accident. Sometimes you drive by the accident and you're affected by it. You listen to the news at night, you're affected by it. Maybe not for long, but you're affected by it. Why? Because anybody who listens to the news at night usually says, I can't listen to this news anymore. Turn it off. You don't even want to listen to the news anymore. Another person got killed. Another terrible thing happened. You get so disgusted by it, you don't want to even listen to it. So the only one who was really not affected by the sin of the golden calf, the Chet HaEgel, was Moshe Rabbeinu. So he was able to know the secrets. Nobody else would know the secrets. But that's a different thing. Now, how do the nations of the world respond? I mean, Rashi seems to imply that when the nations of the world, the Sodom, for example, the nations of the world, hear about all these crazy mitzvos that we do, what is their reaction? Jews are crazy. Jews do crazy things. And it's so interesting. It's so interesting. You have a Jew on a subway, and he sees a Hasidic Jew. So what's his reaction? He'll go over to the Hasidic Jew and he'll say to him, what's the matter with you? We're now in the 21st century. It's 2018, and you dress like 200 years ago. What's that all about? It just doesn't make any sense. So there's a story that, a person went over to a Hasidic Jew like that, and the Hasidic Jew turned to him and says, I'm not Jewish, I'm Amish. You know what the Amish are? Mm-hmm. From ancient Germany, they live in Pennsylvania. Oh, you're Amish. I have a lot of respect for the Amish. You're so meticulous in your mitzvahs and everything else. I have a lot of respect for the Amish. I'm sorry to have bothered you. And of course, then he says in Yiddish, and because I'm a Jew, it bothers you, But that's how it is. Someone, does these things, You see Muslims spread a carpet out in Kennedy Airport and they daven and they don't care what the world says.
Yeah.
But a Jew has to put on tefillin in Kennedy Airport. They're embarrassed to go to some corner and they hide. It's the way nature is. The Rashi says that the Satan and the Umas HaOlam make fun of the Jews, saying, how silly are you? You do silly things. You do crazy things. Who wears boxes on their heads? Who wears strings hanging from their clothes? Who does these things? And yet, in Parshas Voas Chanon, it says, "Kihi chachmaschem ubinaschem le'enei ha'omim." It enhances the respect the nations have for you. Asher yishmu neskol ha'chukim ha'ela. They hear all these chukim, and they say to themselves, "Kihi chachmaschem ubinaschem." How smart is this God that gives these rules? So in Voas Chanon, Moshe says to the Jewish people, he says, "I just want you to know that when you follow the Torah and the mitzvahs, people will respect you, because it means you belong to a group. It means you're law-abiding. If you follow these rules that you don't understand, it means you're going to follow the rules that you do understand." And there's a lot. You may not be aware of this, but in the social media, there's really an attack now against the Hasidic community. There are a lot of people who were Hasidically born and they rebelled against the Hasidic community, and they created these YouTube videos, and there's creating movies of how, and there's organizations now to help you become un-Hasidic, how to deprogram you. There's a whole bunch of things going on. And they were interviewing someone from the Satmar community, and it was very interesting, and he was talking about the fact, they were questioning him, how come the schools don't have a strong English curriculum? Satmar schools they teach Yiddish, they teach a lot of Ramchals and different things, but they don't have a strong English department. That's not their focus. So it was very, very interesting, and he says, we have our education handed down from generations. You're right, maybe we don't have the strongest English curriculum, but our kids are not, our schools don't require, metal detectors for our students. And we require from the outside, but not for our students. Our kids are not bullying other people, and are not beating up other people, we're not shooting up schools. So whatever system we have, as ancient as it is, it works. We don't have the problems you have with all your technology. That was his answer. Now it's interesting. I had this Shabbos by me. We had a full house. The hotel was full. Everybody was there. There was an ufruf, so we had the father, the bride stay by us, and there was a bride from Baltimore who has the chatan lives in CHUQAS. She stayed by us. Then we had something called mizamrim. Have you ever heard of mizamrim? No.
French?
No. Mizamrim means singers.
Singer?
Singers. Listen to this. They're Satmar Hasidim, but they're also Skaveda and Vizhnitz and everything else. And there are groups of them. There's like 50 or 100, but we had 4 of them by us, where you hire them to come to your simcha on Shabbos, and they handle all the entertainment.
Wow.
It was gorgeous. They had one there who was a chazan. So they was having an ufruf, aliyah for the chatan, and they hired these 4 fellows. And one of them davened, and he had a beautiful voice. He was a professional chazan. He takes professional voice lessons. And the others were singers. They sang Zmirot and then davening, and they harmonized, and it was like a choir. And the family who was making the simcha hired these people, and they came to the community of Kew Gardens, professional people, and that's what they do. They sing. Now, I have no idea how much they charge for a Shabbos, but we put them up. They stayed in our 3rd floor. They moved in. And it was fascinating because I'm very not Hasidic by nature. And these were Hasidic with the spodek, with the fur cats and everything else. I mean, the whole garb.
Wow.
But we made them very comfortable. And they joined us at the Shabbos table, by Sudash Lishit. and they sang. And I gotta admit, it was wonderful.
Well, they slept in your house?
Yeah, we put them up, listen, in Kew Gardens. You've been to my home. People book 6 months in advance rooms, we're always washing and changing linen. I mean, it drives us crazy. But we have the rooms. Many of the rooms are suites. They're rooms together with bathrooms. So they have their privacy, and people in the community call up. They don't call up me, they call up my wife, and they arrange for sleeping. So, I mean, we were schmoozing with these guys.
When she has time to cook.
What?
When she has the time to cook, your wife.
Oh, it's you should see the house. Our house is a house on wheels. You gotta. It's an interesting experience to spend the week in our house. Tomorrow I have a court mediation. I have a bunch of attorneys and people, and my wife she's finished school, but she's not going to be home tomorrow. She's going to disappear, she says, because she knows the people are coming and all the screaming and yelling is going on. So on Tuesday we'll have the screaming and yelling. Tuesday night we'll get together with the grandchildren and take them someplace. I'll tell you where we took them this week. And then come Shabbos we'll have a house full of people again. So this manager, one of the owners. So we were schmoozing, and he was saying, talking, and he was saying that someone from Lakewood or whatever it was asking him that, you're young girls, they're 19, they're 20, and they don't go to college, they don't have any secular education. How are they going to marry boys who are going to sit and learn? How are they going to earn a living? So he says, I asked this rabbi from Lakewood, what do your girls do? So he says, well, our girls are medical billers, and our girls go to accounting, they're CPAs, accountants, whatever it is. He says, our girls are so talented that when they get into a business, within a few years, they run the business. That's what he says. He says his daughter got married. By 20, she was running a multi-million-dollar business.
Wow.
And she said, and then he says, and guess what? All your medical billers and accountants are working for her now. She's their boss. She never went to college. You guys went to college. You are the professionals. And she's hiring you to do her job. You're working for her. He says, that was very cute.
And Rabbi told them? Or?
Yeah, that's what he told them. He says it's just an amazing thing. Because here, he said to me something I found shocking. He says in Monroe, which is where the Satmar community is headquartered, he says every week a full class of children are born.
Of children what?
Are born. I said, what do you mean? He says every week there's 25 boys that are born in Monroe, which means those 25 boys of that week will be a first grade class. He says they have 81 first grade classes in Monroe. And second grade, and third grade, and fourth grade, he says every week there are 25 kids being born. That's a class.
Every week?
Every week.
25 boys?
25, 30 boys are born every week in Monroe. That's how many people live there. And it's a full class. He says every week a full class is born. So in the course of a year, 52 classes are
Doctors do
born.
good money or?
I don't know, everybody. And how do they support themselves and how do they feed themselves? It's just an amazing thing. And then comes Motzei Shabbat. One of the fellows, here's a guy, a Hasidic guy, he's about 19, 20 years old with the side curls. He says to me, do you have a piano? I says, actually, we do. We have a piano on the second floor. Someone gave it to me as a gift because I did a lot of things for them. And we keep it in tune because my grandchildren are slowly learning. He said, well, I'll play you some songs. And he goes up there and he's playing songs, all the modern English songs and Hebrew songs. But even the modern English songs, he knows them all.
On Shabbos it's allowed to play?
Not on Shabbos, after Shabbos,
After
Motzei
Shabbat.
Shabbat, after Havdalah, 10:30 at night.
Oh my gosh.
This guy, and we're taping him, he's playing the piano like a concert pianist.
Wow.
No education?
No education, a 19-year-old Hasidic Jew that you would walk on the street straight out of Williamsburg.
Talent.
Talent.
Wow.
The guy who sings goes twice a week for voice lessons, and he's a professional chazan. And his voice is gorgeous, and his memory is impeccable.
On Shabbos they sing just a cappella, right? Without
They
no
sing a
instrument.
cappella. They don't even need music. They don't need music. their voices are so beautiful. And they can sing like all the singers, like Kalbach and everything, and they daven. As a matter of fact, they davened in the minyan and this Friday night. And Saturday, they were going to have their own minyan. And the rabbi of the shul begged them, he says, please don't have your own minyan. Come back here tomorrow morning, do it again. And they did. And they'll daven shacharit, they'll be the chazanim. And amongst the Ashkenazi Jews with all these tunes, it's gorgeous. So, it's an amazing, amazing thing. And I'm not even sure how we got off the topic. We were, I don't know, whatever the topic was. But it's just so amazing, the talent out there. You're talking about natural talent. But you have people that have natural talent, and they don't use it. And it goes wasted. And here are people who don't have the education maybe that you think they should have, or what I, as an American, might think is necessary, and yet I sat in awe of these people because of they were friendly, they were warm, they were funny, they laughed at all my jokes. I mean, they were really very, very respectful.
They're from Lakewood or from?
No, Monroe, New Square in Muncie, Williamsburg.
Four people only.
4 people, but from different parts. And this is an organization, Mizamim is one of many, that they do this week after week. Now, we housed them, they were very comfortable by us. They had very beautiful rooms, they're very comfortable. They've been housed in next to the boiler sometimes, people put them anywhere. But this is what they do. You hire them to come to your simcha and make your simcha extra special. And that's what they do.
Really simple.
They create the ruach. They do the davening, the singing, they come to the meal, they sing zmirot at the meal. It's really entertaining. And all your guests just sit there and they get entertained by these people. Professional entertainers. Jewish religious entertainers.
On Shabbat.
On Shabbos.
So they don't use electricity, just sing.
They don't use any electricity, they just sing.
Shabbat Katan, right?
I don't use any electricity and I sing also, but my singing is not worth coming to. If I sing, you'll leave, you'll run away. What can I tell you? It was such a pleasure. But it opened my eyes that not everything is about college and not everything is about, you have talents and skills. And the Jewish community is very diverse and they make tremendous contributions. I found it very, very fascinating.
You didn't know it before?
I knew it before by hearing about it. This was an experience.
Wow.
This was an experience.
Yesterday concert in Druzhba or Natal.
Right?
Somebody, my own friend, Yonatan Mamonov, he have talent, is Romalakov, teaching many children.
And you enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Imagine if he was at your Shabbat table for the whole Shabbat.
Yeah.
Very good.
It was regular Shabbat or Shabbat Katan?
It was a Shabbat Chatan. So they were hired by people in the community. They were just our guests. But when they came home to us, we were up to 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning in the kitchen. The lights were all out, but they were funny. It was just a pleasure. They were personable. They were warm. You felt good. That means when you were in their presence, you felt love. It was a good feeling. How often do you have that?
Oh my God.
Not often, right? You come to shul sometimes, you don't get that feeling. These people made it nice, made it comfortable.
Where should you go
This
to
is their
listen to that
profession. But that singing was their profession. They didn't have to be friendly. Friendly came natural. But they had what to say. It was really very, very fascinating on many ways. This week, we were exposed once again to machlokas. It seems week after week. We had the shalach, the maratim, machlokas. And then they wanted meat. We had machlokas, kivros hataiva. Then we had korach. Now we're here in Parshas CHUQAS. And from last week to this week, we aged 40 years. last week we were in the second year going out of Egypt. Now we're in the 40th year. Everybody had died. We have a whole brand new generation. Okay, Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam were around, but they were going to die this week, 40 years later. And yet they're complaining again, the same old complaints. We have no water, we have no food, we don't like the man. Now it's interesting that much of the machlokas was centered about water. So one of the Mephoshim say, it makes sense. Because water, the whole thing of water was created on day 2, where Hashem separated the waters of the heavens and the earth. And because there was separation, machloket, what words are not included in day 2 of creation? Vayar Hashem ki tov, right? It doesn't say ki tov. It says on Tuesday, ki tov twice. That's why many people like to get married on Tuesday night, because it says ki tov twice.
To travel.
What?
To travel.
Right, it's a good day to travel, but Monday is machlokas. Machlokas seems to follow wherever there's water, there's machlokas. So one of the speakers I heard, he said that there was this rabbi, a lady comes to him and says to him, oh, I have no shalom bias. My husband and I always, no matter what it is, we're fighting, no end. I can't take it anymore.
What day you married?
What?
They ask what day you married?
Why are you married?
What day
day?
you married? What day?
No. So he said to him, I have a cure for your problem. What is it? He goes in and he comes back with a little bottle of water. He says, this water comes from the Beis HaMikdash. It comes from a spring that's underneath the Beis HaMikdash. What am I supposed to do with it? He says, very simple. When you and your husband start arguing, take a sip of the water, but don't swallow it.
And hold it.
Hold it for 10 minutes.
And then you're gonna argue.
10 minutes. And then afterwards, you can put it back in the bottle or you can swallow whatever you want. So she did that, and all of a sudden she comes back and says, Rabbi, this water is a miracle. There's no fighting anymore, there's no fighting. Of course, the rabbi then says that the water is just regular tap water. There's nothing special about it. The reason why you're not fighting is because when your
10
husband,
minutes.
for those 10 minutes when you have the water in your mouth and you don't answer back your husband, he gets it out of his system, he calms down.
Maybe he can do that too, to hold the water in his mouth.
It doesn't work the same. For some reason it doesn't work the same.
Why are you not answering to me? Ladies, why
doesn't
don't
work
talk to
the
me?
same.
For the woman, it's gonna work. For the man, not. Yeah.
You see that? It doesn't work the same. I don't know what it is.
Different
Then
mentality.
you're going to get all these phone calls. Did you really say that? You're not going to get all these complaints, phone calls, But,
Are you ignoring me?
there's a man who's been married for many years already. I see that. Oh, yes. It is what it is. It is what it is. But, it's just fascinating. It's fascinating.
Men don't need the water.
Yeah, the men don't need the water. But that was his suggestion, how water could undo
Good
machlokas.
suggestion, eh?
It's not a bad suggestion. It's very interesting. We're going to skip around a little bit over here in Parshas CHUQAS. There's some other things I want to talk about the Porah Aduma. But okay, let's go back into the Porah Aduma. So we know as follows. So now we know why we have chukim. We have mitzvos that we don't understand. The purpose of the mitzvos that we don't understand is to remind us that we don't understand any mitzvos. But everything we do, even the ones we understand, we do it because Hashem tells us. They're gzeros. And the truth of the matter is, if we do the things we don't understand, how much more so we'll do the things we do understand, so the nations of the world will actually respect us. Because they believe that you have rules, you have regulations, you follow it. I'm always amazed when people of the world rewrite history. There was no Holocaust. They're ignorant. People say things that are of ignorance. Jews have never been accused of ignorance. That's not something that they've been accused of. Now, comes the Porah Aduma. So who actually prepares the first Porah Aduma is Eliezer. It's not Aharon, even though Aaron was forgiven for the golden calf. It's not Aaron, it's Eliezer. We know there were 9 Porah Adumas. Moshe made the first, and that lasted for hundreds and hundreds of years. Ezra made about 3 or 4, but there was 9 Porah Adumas.
Red cow.
What?
Red cow.
Red cows, 9 of them. Now the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel, he has something very interesting. He says that when you slaughter an animal, you're supposed to check to make sure the animal is kosher. There are 18 trouble spots that you're supposed to check. The truth is there's even more, there's 48. And you go through Hilchos Treifos, you go through all of them. Today, we don't check that. That means when they do shechita in the slaughterhouse, there's only one part of the animal that they actually check. And what part is that?
Lungs.
The lungs. And the reason they check the lungs is to make sure there's no holes in the lungs. We, Ashkenazim, if there's a hole in the lung, but it's covered over with saliva, with mucus, that's called the sircha. And as long as the lung can be blown up and it doesn't bubble, it's kosher. Bet Yosef, they don't accept that. So Bet Yosef shechita is always glatt kosher, and Ashkenazi can have up to 3 of these problems that are mucused over and still be called glatt. And if they can have more, it's still kosher. Okay. But there are 18 other sections. You have to check the veins, you have to check the kidneys, the color, a whole bunch all over the animal. We don't check any of that. Why not? What do we rely on not to check it? We rely on a rove. That the majority of animals don't have problems with their kidneys and everything else. So we shech the animal, and unless something jumps up and says problem, we only check the lungs, and we stamp it glatt kosher, and it goes on its way. Okay. The first Porah Aduma, the Targum Yonason says, Hashem instructed Eliezer, check all 18 trouble spots. So Rabbi Ephraim has a whole thing over here, why? And he comes up with an important rule that we often hear. When you do something the first time, do it 100%. Because the way you start a mitzvah sets the tone for the rest of your life. A bar mitzvah boy, we try to let him daven for the Yomud. Let him lead Birkat HaMazon. Let him do the mitzvah. Why? He just became bar mitzvah. Those mitzvahs he's doing for the first time set the tone for his whole life. So they said that Eliezer was told, when you do this mitzvah of Porah Aduma, it's very important. Just like a Chat and Kala get married. We have a rule for the first year, the guy's supposed to stay home at night, he's not supposed to go out to learn. We call that Shana Rishona. The first year of marriage sets the tone. Things slide the second year, the third year, but beginnings are important. The beginnings create the foundation. Everything is built on the foundation. If you don't create a good foundation, you can't build properly. So Hashem said to Eliezer, the first Porah Aduma, I want you to check it out from head to toe. Start it off right. So then the son of the Netziv, Reb Chaim Berlin, he said, we got a problem. What's the problem? That the Porah Aduma was burnt complete, whole. In order to check out the 18 spots, you have to cut up the animal into pieces. You got to cut through, but they didn't cut the animal. So he says, I understand the concept. You want to check all of the animal, but how do you do it if you can't cut up the animal? The animal has to be burnt whole. So the answer is a shocking answer. He says that the clouds that surrounded the camp, and the one that was the fiery cloud that led them, had the strength of an X-ray. That's what he writes. He says that it was so powerful, the light, that when you held the animal up to the light, it was like looking through a jar. You could see everything inside. So Eliezer took the Porah Aduma, put it in front of the cloud, and he was able to see the entire skeleton and bone structure of the inside of the animal, and he checked all 18 treifos, 100% kosher, it passed.
X-ray, MRI.
MRI, like a CAT scan, MRI. What is the most accurate? Is it a CAT scan or MRI? Which is more accurate?
MRI.
Probably the MRI, because the MRI probably cuts it in sections.
CAT scan too.
Yeah, CAT scan also.
Different.
It was like a CAT scan.
CAT scan is with the X-ray
Right.
thing. The MRI is a magnet power.
Right. It wasn't ultrasound that had haze. This was crystal clear. The way he described it, it was like looking into a glass jar. That's how he says it. He says the Anana cover in the midbar was so bright, you could see what was inside, like looking at a glass jar, and therefore the Kohen could look at the parah and see what was inside, treif, not treif, clear. So that's an amazing thing. And afterwards, years later, they relied on rove like everything else. Then he says that when they complained about the man, what did Hashem do? Hashem sent the snakes after them. Why snakes? Because what was the complaint? The complaint was the man, we're tired of it, we're tired of the taste, we're tired of its look. So Hashem says, well, there are animals who, everything they eat tastes like dirt. Now snakes eat dirt. And therefore he sent the snakes to punish them. The Al-Shich says that it's a double whammy. Because why does Hashem reward the snake that wherever it goes he has food? So the snake should never ask Hashem for anything, right? You know, this way Hashem said to the snake, you're taken care of, don't bother me. It's called Nazifa. Nazifa means where you literally throw the guy out and have nothing to do with him. He says the Jewish people, Hashem said, the fact that you need to come to me every single day, do we have food, do we have food, we have food, that's not a curse, that's a bracha. And you should be very thankful for that bracha. But of course, they didn't appreciate it. They were tired. They were tired of the man. Not only were they tired of it, they didn't trust it anymore. You know, they said as a person eats so much and nothing comes out, they just didn't trust it anymore. They reached a point where it no longer had significance to them. And as a consequence, Hashem sent the snakes. What was the cure for these fiery serpents that came after them and started to destroy them?
Looking at the copper snake.
So Moshe made a nachash. So let's see what it says over here. Perach Aleph. Let's look for a moment. Perach Aleph, pasuk hey. So it's interesting because of course these are things that come up over and over again. So it says that they were exhausted from after they left Har HaHor, and you have to understand that a lot of things had changed for them in the desert. Miriam died. When Miriam died, the water disappeared. Water was a staple. They took it for granted. Why did the water disappear? Because nobody cried for Miriam the way it was appropriate. So Hashem sent them a message. All these years, in the schut of Miriam, you had water, and when she dies, nobody sheds a tear. Nobody says a eulogy for her. Well, maybe you don't appreciate her gift. So the water disappeared. It all came back because of Moshe. When Aaron died, they cried. They cried for 30 days. Everybody cried. But what disappeared? The clouds. And they got attacked, right? The king of Aram, which is really Amalek, attacked. It all came back from Moshe. So now the camp was back stabilized. But people got nervous. For the first time in a long time, they felt what it means to be without water, what it means to be without food that you could really eat, and what it means to be without protection. And they all knew the future. They were going to go into Israel. Moshe was not going to go with them. Which means they're not going to have water with them anymore. They're going to have to dig wells. And they're not going to have food anymore. They're going to have to grow food. And they're not going to have protection anymore. They're going to have to fight. So if you were a nation that was taken care of, a few weeks ago there was this lawsuit where the parents sued their child to move out. There was a kid who was like 45 years old, didn't move out of his parents' house. So the parents said,
He killed them, right?
What?
He killed them?
No, not yet. That might come down tomorrow. We had kids that killed their parents already once. Not the first time. It's not news then. That's not news anymore. But they refused to move out. This kid refused to move out. So the parents took him to court, forcing them to move out. And the judge ruled he had to move out. He didn't want to move out. He was very happy living at home. So imagine you have to take your kid to court to get him to move out. Hi, good evening. So the Jewish people for 40 years were very comfortable in the desert. Very comfortable. Okay?
Ключи забили. Набой.
Дай, Монь. Дай ключи.
Okay. They were very comfortable in the desert. And now the thought of going into Israel without Moshe was becoming very real. Aaron had died. Miriam had died. So it had become very, very real. And it's interesting, nobody's death is recorded the date except Aaron. Miriam died on the 10th day of Nisan. Exactly 1 year later, on the 10th day of Nisan, Yeshua will take them across the Jordan River. Aaron died on Rosh Chodesh Av. Okay? And he was buried in the Jordan Valley on a mountain, Hor, next to his children, Nadav and Avihu. Moshe would die shortly after that. They would cry for 30 days, and then Yeshua would take them across. So life was becoming very real for a people who had been living a very comfortable life where they were sustained. And things were changing. So they got very, very nervous over here, and they complained. So Hashem sent seraphim, fiery serpents. It says, nechashim hasrafim, snakes that when they bit you, the venom burnt you. It burned. And many died. It doesn't say how many, but many died. They came to Moshe, they were sorry. So Hashem says to Moshe, aseh lecha saraf. Make for yourself a saraf. It's a certain type of a snake. But what did Moshe make? He made a nachash. So they all say, Hashem told you to make a saraf. Why'd you make a nachash? Nachash is a snake, but a different type of a snake. So they unfortunately give a very interesting answer. They say the saraf represented Talmidei Chachamim, was Moshe. Hashem said, make a saraf. I can forgive them for what they said about me. I don't forgive them what they said about you. Moshe made a nachash. Moshe says, I can forgive them what they said about me. I can't forgive them what they said about you. He says, like, we have this all the time. In our tefillin, it says Shema Yisrael. What does it say in Hashem's tefillin? Who is Mika Amcha Yisrael Goyach Bar? So it's like the Jewish people. On Pesach, we call it, Hashem says Chag Pesach. We call it Chag Pesach because Hashem jumped over the houses. We praise Hashem. Hashem calls it Chag HaMatzos. The Jewish people were willing to eat matzah. So there are many things that in the halacha, we reflect Hashem, Hashem reflects us. So Hashem wanted a saraf to show, I forgive you, but I don't forgive you for what you said about Moshe. Moshe says just the opposite. I forgive them, I don't forgive them what they said about Hashem. Now this Nachash Nechoshes was a copper snake, which is the symbol of the American Medical Association. What happened to that snake? It saved all their lives. The Gemara says, does a snake really save your life? By looking up at the snake, you looked up at Shemayim. Over time, guess what happened with the snake? People worshipped it. It became Avodah Zarah. And it stayed around. Nobody had the courage to break it apart, to get rid of it, even though they were worshiping idols, until Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Chizkiyahu HaMelech is already in Malachim Beis. He took away the Nachash Nechoshes. He broke it apart. He also hid the Sefer Refuahs. He made a lot of changes amongst the Jewish people. But nobody was going to destroy something Moshe Rabbeinu made. And this snake, people worshipped it like it was a god. I mean, it's just so interesting how quickly people go from rational thinking to irrational thinking. It's just an amazing thing. But this Nachash Nechoshesh became extremely powerful. There's a whole medrash here how Moshe Rabbeinu broke the news to Aaron that he was about to die. He goes through the whole history of the Jewish people from Adam and Chava, and finally Aaron says people die, it's inevitable, nobody lives forever, even the biggest tzaddikim have to die, that's the nature of the world. And then finally Moshe said, I'm glad you said that, and now let's go, you, me, and your son Eliezer. And they did the whole exchange. Aaron took off the Bigdei Kahuna, and Eliezer put on the Bigdei Kahuna. That must have been very difficult, to wear your father's clothing. Now, I'm not sure if that's what happened in the future. I think probably every Kohen Gadol had his own clothes, because they had to fit, they had to be very particular size. In general, from a halacha point of view, are you allowed to wear your parents' clothing? What do we do after, God forbid, a parent passes away? Most children will not wear their parents' clothing. They'll give the clothing away to Goodwill or to some stock or whatever it is. From a halacha point of view, even if you would wear your parents' clothing, one of the things we don't wear are shoes. Why? Because we don't want to give the impression you could fill someone else's shoes. It seems shoes were the one thing we don't wear. That when a person becomes Avelut, they take off their shoes, and even if your father's shoe size is the same shoe size as yours, we generally don't wear it. Watches, jewelry, we do wear. When my mother passed away, she gave the jewelry to her children and her grandchildren, and they wear the jewelry because that reminds them of their grandmother or their mother. Jewelry we wear, watches, cufflinks, tie pins, etc. You could even wear your father's talit and stuff like that, although most people have their own talit, things of that nature. Books for sure, I have many of my father's books. I didn't have that many, because after one of my brother-in-laws were in a flood, so he lost all his books, so we gave him whatever book my father had. My father didn't have that many books from Europe. They didn't print that many books in those days. But, those things we have. But, households are, one of the hardest things is to clean up a household. What do you do with the pots, pans, and dishes? Sometimes you can use those pots, pans, and dishes. They're new. Sometimes they're very old, so you don't use them. You don't want to use them. There are certain things that are, my kids come to the house all the time, and they sit around the table. I get the Seder plate, I get the Megillah, I get the Kiddush cup. I usually say to the kids, "Hello, I'm still here." I'm still using the Seder plate. You turn over the Seder plate, and my daughter put her name on the back of it already. Mine, it's, hello. It gets a little bit unsettling, but
Wasn't it allowed?
You're allowed, except for shoes.
Shoes not good, yeah?
No, shoes we don't do. But you're allowed to, suits and shirts and stuff like that. But it's most people won't, unless you're very desperate, unless it's something that's very important to you. If it's something that means something to you.
Better not?
There's no better not. No. It stays in the family. It shows respect. You're wearing your father's things that were important to your father is important to you. These are all things. But for Aharon, literally, as he took off an article of clothing, Eliezer put it on. So Aaron saw his son dressed like a Kohen Gadol. That was a nechama for him. Moshe never saw that. Moshe, when he died, never saw Gershom or Eliezer take over. They were not involved at all. They were not Nesiim. They were not Nevi'im. The only one who he saw was Yehoshua. And maybe Yehoshua was like a son to him. We don't hear much about Yehoshua's family. We don't hear anything. Other than Yehoshua had girls. He had no boys. That's what it says. That Yehoshua had all girls. He didn't have any boys. Rabbi Palm, he brings down over here that when they were complaining to Moshe, why'd you take us out of Egypt? It was so much better than, he says, people don't realize how good they have it. He brings down that a certain Hasidic man came to Rav Palm and he complained that he couldn't sleep last night. He was tossing and turning in his bed all night. So Rav Palm said, wow, he says, yesterday I was at the hospital visiting someone who was critically ill. And they had to have nurses move him from this side to that side, not to get bed sores. And you last night could toss and turn all by yourself. You didn't need any nurses. Here the guy's complaining, I can't sleep, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I couldn't get a night's sleep, I tossed and turned all night. And Rabban said,
You're lucky you do it yourself.
You have no idea how lucky you are that you're able to toss and turn yourself. You don't have to have people tossing and turning for you. He says the yeshiva bacher comes home from supper one night and his mother serves him chicken with vegetables and it looks gorgeous and he says, "Ay, chicken again, in the yeshiva all we ever get is chicken, chicken, chicken." So Palm said to them, that's very interesting. He says, during the war years in America, even at the weddings, they just had some bread, some pickled herring, and a bottle of seltzer. They didn't even have chicken at the weddings during the war years. You're complaining about having chicken because you had it more than once a week. He says there were times when you didn't have chicken even once a year. It depends what it is. And this is a famous one. I heard this many times. A husband came to him that he had a complaint against his wife, and he has no shalom bayis. He comes home from a hard day's work. She's home all day. They have 4 little children. And when he comes into the house, there's toys everywhere. Why can't she clean up the house? Why can't the house be clean when he comes home? She's home all day anyway. What is she doing all day? Of course, Rabbi says that he had a couple here the other day that were crying and crying and crying because they had no children. Their house was spotless. And the husband says, I wish I could come home and trip over toys because I have children all over the house. He says, just look at that. You have toys all over the house. How lucky you are that you have children all over the house. Look at this guy. He does no children at all. He has a clean house. What do you think he'd rather have? Toys or a clean house? He'd rather have the toys. So he says that there's so, you bemoan your misfortune, not realizing how lucky you are. And Rabbi was very well known that he would bring these contrasts out. When people always, complain how bad they had it, he says, you think that's bad, there's always people who have it worse, number one. And you should be thankful for what you have. I saw a story over here in the Pninim al HaTorah. That's a publication out of, we have another few minutes. That's a publication that comes out of Cleveland, Ohio. Pninim al HaTorah, Rabbi Scheinbaum. And he says that there was this girl, and she was already 23 years old. She had been dating a while already. She couldn't find the right person. And she finally, someone introduced her to a boy who said he's perfect for you. His personality, his warmth, it's just the type of person that he is. He's just perfect for you. And they went out a while, and she really liked the boy. But the boy had a scar going from over here all the way down his cheek. And she just couldn't get over the scar. And by the 3rd or 4th date, he noticed already how uncomfortable she was. And he said to her, I really enjoy your company. I think we have a lot in common. But I see the way you look at me, I see you really can't get over the scar. She says, yeah, it bothers me. He said, well, let me tell you about the scar. Years ago, I was in the bungalow colony. I was in upstate New York. I was 13, and I was walking home, and I heard this girl screaming. It was a 10-year-old girl, and a bunch of the hoodlums in the neighborhood started to attack her and wanted to violate her. And I heard her screaming, and I ran to help this girl. And I took on these 4 hoodlums who beat me to an inch of my life with a stick. And the stick had a nail in it. And that stick cost me, that caused this scar. I don't regret what I did, because I saved that girl's life. I don't regret what I did. But the scar is what I have to live with. And the girl was shocked, mesmerized. And the girl looked and says, I was that girl.
Yeah.
That was me.